Pardon. Warmer than I expected. Alrighty. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Three tails, Old Yin. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two tails, one head, young yang. Three tails, old yin. Three tails, old yin. Take a quick pause and read a book my son Noah chose, which I had never read before. Hooper Humperdink, not him. I'm gonna have a party, but I don't think that I'll ask Hooper Humperdink. I'll ask Alice, I'll ask Abe, I'll ask Bob and Bill and Babe. I'll ask Charlie, Clara, Cora, Danny, Davy, Daisy, Dora. I'll ask Dinny, I'll ask Dot, but Hooper Humperdink, I'll not. Elma, Ellie, Ethel, Ed, Frida, Francis, Frank, and Fred. I'll ask George and Gus and Gary, Henry, Haida, Hank, and Harry. Did I say Harry or Henry the first? First time I read this, I thought that same thing. I'll ask every kid I like. Irene, Ivy, Izzy, Ike, Joe and Jerry, Jack and Jim, but Hooper Humperdink, not him. That Humperdink, I don't know why, but somehow I don't like that guy. A party needs a band to play, and so I'll get a band, okay? This is, I don't know what, the KK Cats are on their way. Yeah, I hope that has no reference to anything fucked up, but, you know, old books, they can have some weird shit in them. And that's not what I'm about, so just as, so you know. And I like Lucy, Luke, and Lum. I like the Lesters. They can come. And Mark and Mary, Mike and Mabel. I'll have to get a bigger table. They'll come by air, by parachute. Nora, Norton, Nat, and Newt. And Olivetta Oppenbeam. I'll have to order more ice cream. I'll need about 10 tons, I think, but none for Hooper Humperdink. Motherfucker. No, Humperdink won't do it all. He's not good fun like Pete and Paul, and Pinky, Pat, and Pastor Knack. I bet they come by Camelback. And so will lots of other pals like Perkins Boys and the Plimpton Gals. QQQ, who begins with Q? Quintuplets, so I'll ask a few. Ralph and Rudolph, Ruth and Russ, and some other R's in a big blue bus. Oh, what a party. Sally, Sue, Solly, Sonny, Steve, and Stu. I'll ask the Simpson sisters too, but I'm not asking you know who. Who is it? Don't keep us in suspense. Nobody wants to play with Hooper. Humperdink's a party pooper. Welcome Tim and Tom and Ted. Grab a hot dog, get well fed. Welcome Ursula, welcome Ub. Strawberry soda by the tub. Guy's name's Ub. Welcome Vera, Violet, Vinny. Welcome Wilbur, Waldo, Winnie. Xavier and Yancey, Yipper. Zacharias, Zeke, and Zipper. All my good friends from A to Z, the biggest gang you'll ever see. The biggest gang there'll ever be. A party big and good as this is too good for anyone to miss. And so, you know, I sort of think I will ask Hooper Humperdink. All right, let's read some I Ching. Our primary hexagram's bottom or internal trigram will be read as broken, broken, broken. This is Kun Earth. Right? Yes, Kun Earth. Kun is Earth, open to receive and support what comes to her, providing for its full development. She makes inspiration manifest, gives it form, and sustains its growth. Earth is available to be used, ready to lend her strength to the work without limit. She protects and accepts all things in their totality, present and potential, in an unconditional embrace. Earth is mother, found in the southwest in the harvest time of late spring, summer and early autumn. Our top or outer trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as solid, broken, broken. This is Zen thunder. Yes. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Young makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Zen thunder above Kun Earth give us our primary hexagram of 16. And once our changing line 2 and 6 transform from old yin to young yang, our bottom trigram for our supporting hexagram will then be broken, solid, broken, which is Con water. Con is deep water, flowing and formless. He is the complement of Li, dark where Li is bright, unconscious to her sharp lucidity, and represents a more fluid, intuitive, and emotional way of perceiving. This is danger, exposure, and solitude, and the need to respond with courageous self-reliance when confronted by the haunting unknown. Water is the middle sun, situated in the north, associated with midwinter and midnight. Our outer or top trigram of our supporting hexagram will then be read as solid, broken, solid, which is Li, fire, and light. Li is fire and light, both inner and outer. As an inner light, she is consciousness at its most lucid and unclouded, holding things together in the mind, perceiving their differences and connections, and discerning the underlying patterns of relationship. And as well as vision, Li is the light that makes things visible, the power to cast light on things, spreading clarity and the awareness of order. Li is the middle daughter, living in the south, the region of midsummer and the burning sun. Li, fire, and light above Con, water, give us supporting hexagram 64. Yeah. We will get the titles to our hexagrams from Lu I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Lu I-ming is a badass. Our primary hexagram 16, Lu I-ming calls joy. Well, Thomas Cleary does through Lu I-ming. Proper timing in action. And 64, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 64 is unsettled, refining the self, repelling mundanity, waiting for the time to restore the primordial celestial positivity. We will get the secret hexagram at the very end, right before the summation. So if you're into suspense, I got you. We will first take a look at the I Ching Tarot for some images to our primary and supporting hexagrams. Let's do 16, joy. Kiwi calls enthusiasm. Art, pleasure, beforehand, neglect. In order to enjoy the art, preparation is necessary in advance, and it is necessary to put everything together as one. In the case of the line, Yao, at the top, enjoys too much and neglects things. Looks like a neglector of things. Something like that. Kind of haunted. And 64, unsettled. Kiwi calls. Oops. Incompletion. Looks like the art on this. Unorganized, unfinished, repetitive. All the lines, 6 Yao positions are unjust, but all lines positions are helping each other. Through repeated failures and successes, it takes time, but you will make great progress. Sounds about right. You know? Especially if you're haunted and neglectful. Should be my new album name, Haunted and Neglectful. All right, we're gonna first read from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is a nice introductory I Ching commentary. Highly recommend. Hexagram 16, she calls enthusiasm. When we approach the I Ching to consult the Oracle, the question we bring to it will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment in time. Or, you know, a whole swath of time sometimes. Key questions. What do you imagine? What inspires you? How can you use your enthusiasm constructively? Oracle. Enthusiasm. Fruitful to set up feudal lords and mobilize the armies. The Chinese word for enthusiasm contains an elephant, a character that also means image. The elephant is magnificent, strong, a source of delight, and also unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Imagination and anticipation move us with ease. With them, we can be motivated and inspired, or we can be carried away by the power of our own story. The energetic charge of enthusiasm can be used to set great things in motion. It is good to use it to expand and enrich your experience by extending your network of communication and support, marshaling your resources ready for future challenges. And it is also good to use such structures to channel the motive power of enthusiasm and keep it from running amok. Then its brightly colored images can be woven securely into the larger patterns and meanings of life. Image. Thunder bursts forth from the earth, enthusiasm. The ancient kings composed music to honor virtue. They celebrated and worshipped the Supreme Lord, joining with their ancestors. Thunder bursts forth from the quiet earth in spring, waking the plants, stirring everything into growth. The ancient kings channeled the joy of spring into music. Singing with the thunder, the people participate in ever-rising energies. Their spontaneous emotion becomes part of a rich and subtle fabric of relationships. The harmony of music, veneration for the supreme divinity, and the family of the ancestors. Sequence. Enthusiasm follows from hexagram 15, integrity. One who possesses greatness and is also capable of integrity is naturally enthusiastic. Integrity grounds enthusiasm, giving its potent images the foundation in ordinary reality that makes them visions rather than fantasies. Someone who has an authentic vision of great potential cannot help but be enthusiastic. If not at times, sometimes overwhelmed. Hexagram 64. Our supporting hexagram puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel. An underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 64, not yet a cross. Key questions. How to prepare for the crossing. How will you know when it's time? Oracle. Not yet a cross, creating success. The small fox, almost across, soaks its tail. No direction bears fruit. Here at the very end of the I Ching, nothing is settled or complete. Everything is in flux. A wise fox will only attempt to cross when there is solid ice on the river. and then pick his way over carefully, every sense alert. If he sets out when the conditions are not right, he won't be able to complete the crossing. He'll be shamed and stranded at best, and he may be altogether sunk. For a small fox on drifting ice in midstream, there's no useful direction. When you are not yet across, you may be hesitating on the verge of a transition, trying to tell whether it's safe to commit yourself. It's time to use the skills of a wise fox. Image: fire dwells above stream, not yet across. A noble one carefully differentiates between beings, so each finds its place. There is fire and there is water, the right elements to cook with, but in the wrong places relative to one another. The next task is to find better places for things so they can work together coherently. A noble one uses the qualities of fire above and stream below, a careful, respectful awareness of the undercurrents, like the acute eyes and ears of the fox, attuned to the river's flow beneath the ice. She will develop her understanding of how the different elements and processes in a complex situation fit together, and find ways for people to relate more harmoniously. Sequence: not yet across follows from hexagram 63, already across. Things cannot be finished, and so not yet across follows, and so the completion. While there's life, there is change, and no transition can be the end. Everything is in place, and then nothing is in place. You arrive, yet you have barely begun. All that completes is the cycle itself. Next, we will look at our changing lines, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. And changing line 6 has the general context, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. They may not both agree with one another, but they also might be elements within the larger situation that both apply. You may resonate more strongly with one than the other. Basically, just gnaw on whatever comes to you. 16, joy, changing line 2. Boundaries turning to stone, not for a whole day. Constancy, good fortune. Boundaries are meant to provide structure and defense, armoring you against negative influences and asserting control. And for a time, they offer rock-solid protection. But boundaries work best when they are porous, allowing exchange and communication. And these boundaries are turning into a trap. They cannot last much longer, not even to the end of the day. The will to communicate, move, and change is stronger than rock, and your purpose is more durable than your boundaries. Let them crumble. Stay constant to the vision that motivates you, and there will be good fortune. Wow. And changing line 6 of hexagram 16. Enthusiasm or joy. Enthusiasm in the dark. Results bring a change of heart. No mistake. You are full of imaginings, intensely emotionally involved, but utterly lacking in clarity. Perhaps you are being unrealistic, or perhaps you already know that you are feeling your way in the dark with no clear sense of what is really out there, or really possible. Once you get some tangible results, then you can begin to perceive things in their right proportions. If your imaginings can be grounded in reality, you no longer need to worry about nursing false enthusiasm. Wow. Next, we will look at Benabel Wynn in I Ching The Oracle, Practical Guide to the Book of Changes, an updated translation, annotated with cultural and historical references, restoring the I Ching to its shamanic origins. One of my all-time favorite books. Cannot say enough good things about Benabel Wen. 16, our primary hexagram. Benabel Wen calls enthusiasm, you. The Oracle, action with enthusiasm, renounce hesitation. Do not let chronic conditions hold you back. Prepare for the advance. Demonstrate enthusiasm and you motivate not just yourself, but also the spirit realms to support you. Honor others with enthusiasm and they will reciprocate. Let the energy of life invigorate you so you can invigorate others. Know your purpose and reason for action, and you will never cease to take action. When you are relentless with your drive, nothing can or will stop you. Thunder shakes the earth, prepare for an advance, auspicious to take military action. You will be at an advantage when you seek the counsel of a master. Proceed with the endeavor at hand, but first seek out sage advice before initiating action. Do not act in haste. The archer studies the target before an arrow is shot. The king honors the dignitaries with music and celebration. The king honors the divine. The king honors the ancestors. This is a hexagram of great gusto and verve. When you can understand these honoring acts of the king, then you too can accomplish beyond even your highest ambitions. To be motivated to achieve, you must first be motivated by the energy of life. An auspicious omen for taking military action. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 64, toward an end, or Ouija. I don't think it's spelled the same as Ouija board, but that's what it makes me think. I also don't know that I'm pronouncing it correctly. I will say that. What is the Oracle? What is to be has not yet come to pass, but as you ford the river, you see the banks on the other side. You are about to peak in the situation at hand, but know that after every peak there comes a time of stagnation and then an inevitable decline. No one is above regulation. There is an order that every one of us must follow, a higher authority that each one of us must submit to. When you forget that, then that is the start of the decline. Remember, reaching the top is only the halfway point. Fire above water, one repels the other, incompatible principles. Fire moves upward, water moves downward. It is not yet time for ferrying relief across the river, reaching toward an end at the point of climax. You are about to ford the great stream, but what is to be has not yet come to pass. There is prosperity to be had, and from where you stand, you can gauge how much further you must go to attain that prosperity. The sage exercises caution in determining a proper order and must understand the power of the 4 cardinal directions. You are about to peak in the situation at hand, but know that after every peak, there comes a time of stagnation and then an inevitable decline. Remember, reaching the top is only the halfway point. There will be a favorable outcome. A little fox wades across a stream. It is close to reaching the shore. The fox's tail gets wet. There is one last obstacle to overcome before you reach the top, and then after you reach the top, there is still the descent to be concerned about. Such is the cycle of changes that we are all subjected to. No easy gains. Hexagram 64, the hexagram of change. Hexagram 64 reaffirms the overarching theme of the Book of Changes, and that is change. The final hexagram is not about completion, it is about incompletion. The end is only a beginning. There is no end. The hexagram expresses a period of transition from the peak of a situation to a time of standstill after that peak, to the time right before the inevitable decline. Considering chronology and timing, you would assume that the final hexagram in the revelation would be one of completion, but the theme of conclusions is found in hexagram 63, not 64. Hexagram 63 was about closing and what comes after a closing. Here, hexagram 64 is about the last mile before arriving at a finish line. In hexagram 64, you are close to achieving the goal, but not quite there yet. Nevertheless, it is generally considered an auspicious hexagram in divination because it indicates that only small, reasonable efforts are needed to achieve great success and final accomplishment of what you seek to attain. And next we will look at our changing lines, which are the most focused part of the reading. They take precedence over all other elements, and put a pin in the map to say you are here, or here are some places you may find yourself. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center where you make and feel connections. And changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. What comes next, Beneville 1? 16. Enthusiasm, changing line 2. Safe within a cave, perpetual and enduring day, good auspices to come. If the first line's advice was to take some time off from the everyday, the second line is affirming that some time as a recluse will be well rewarded. Stabilized by rock, you will know the judgment before the end of the day. Perseverance brings good fortune. You do not flatter those above you. You do not turn your nose up to those below you. Intuitively, you know the answer to your inquiry already. You manifest the objectivity of a rock. To be successful, you must be able to see the seeds, sensitive to even the most subtle and early signs of a change in conditions. At first glimpse of the seeds, you must know whether to take action. Do not hesitate or delay. Do not let even a day pass in hesitation. You must be able to see what is hidden. Success in your endeavor hinges on it. Shi has been interpreted as one who is stabilized, wedged in securely by a rock, or being anchored securely by a rock. Yet in antiquity, this ideogram was also used to denote a stone cave in the side of a mountain. Consider the specific context of the inquiry to determine which interpretation applies in the matter. Several differing interpretations of the second line are worth noting. It's been interpreted as meaning that one was trapped inside a cave or by a rock, but fortuitously was rescued within a day's time. Alternatively, the rock is a symbol of unwavering integrity and stability, enjoyed interminably as long as one walks the virtuous path. Yet a third interpretation reads the line as one who is caught in the middle, but the middle position is most auspicious, and thus one remains safe and secure. Yet a fourth reading is to see this as indicating a defensive position hiding behind a rock or in a cave for protection. While you are safely protected, prosperity continues to flourish. Wow. Hibernating. I've been doing it. All right. Sixth line. Nearing conclusion, a mind darkens, retreating inward, thoughts obscured, journeying into the underworld, deep and profound. A poignant experience to the end. Overflow causing change. There is no blame. As the endeavor seems to near its completion, at the denouement of the matter at hand, you see that perhaps you had been motivated by illusions, lost in a long past memory, propelled forward by falsehoods that you wanted to see as true. A sober awakening. Just when you fear it may be too late, you arrive at a logical understanding. Yet it is not too late. So long as you are still capable of changing, of correcting, all can still end quite favorably and you will be freed from error. There is an opportunity for growth. No culpability. A mystic might read this line as a journey into the underworld, facing one's shadow and leaving the experience profoundly changed. All right, next, let's do James de Corn's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links in the description box below too. He is a practitioner of the Tao himself and basically synthesizes several I Ching commentaries in this spot. You can find it online, which is what the links are about in the description box. And follow along if you want, or do your own I Ching readings and use this. It's a lot because he's synthesizing several I Ching commentaries, but that's also can be very helpful when you want to see, the various perspectives. Some of the leading English translation commentaries on the I Ching. He quotes people like Carl Jung and stuff like the Kabbalah. And obviously by Gnostic Book of Changes, there's a Gnostic flavor on here. 16, enthusiasm / self-deception / repose. Hexagram number 16. Other titles might be the symbol of harmony, harmonious joy, repose, happiness, providing for, provision, excess, merriment, self-confidence, contentment, harmonize, excitement, intemperance, self-deception. D.F. Hook says, repose in the absolute confidence that the action now being taken is right. Also refers to music. Judgment leg. Enthusiasm indicates that feudal princes may be set up and the army advantageously mobilized. Wilhelm/Baines, enthusiasm, it furthers one to install helpers and to set armies marching. Blofeld, repose profits those engaged in building up the country and sending forth armies. This means that perfect certainty as to the rightness of our cause is of great value under the conditions mentioned. The usual meaning of this character is beforehand or happiness. In the English translation of Wilhelm's version, it appears as enthusiasm. Repose was suggested by the Chinese experts who kindly vetted this manuscript. At first, I felt hesitant about adopting it until I realized that where it is used favorably, it must be understood as the kind of mental repose which follows absolute confidence that the action now being taken is the right one. In lines 1, 3, and 6, however, it clearly means failure to act when action is essential. In line 5, failure to act owing to incapacity. Lu, happiness. It is of benefit to build up the country or business and send the army forth. Receivers of this hexagram should be wary of exhibiting excessive enthusiasm when beginning a new undertaking. If they are not, there will be misfortune. The hexagram also advises that everything necessary for advancement should be made ready. Then, if an opportunity presents itself, it should be seized immediately without hesitation while it's in my mind, since hexagram 64 is about the fox on, shifting, changing ice, not necessarily being easily able to cross the great stream. It talked about in Hilary Barrett's commentary about him looking under the ice for the currents. And that makes me think of this, that the energy that we have shouldn't necessarily go into enthusiasm. It should be in making sure our footing is sure and that we are monitoring the shifts in the river beneath us. Ritzema/Karcher, providing for harvesting, installing feudatories to move legions. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of what is needed to meet the future. It emphasizes that accumulating strength through foresight and prudence so things can be fully enjoyed is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time you are told to provide for. The image leg, thunder exploding out of the earth, the image of enthusiasm. The ancient kings, in accordance with this, composed their music and honored virtue, offering it especially to God when they worshipped him at the service of their ancestors. Wilhelm/Baines, block party. Thunder comes resounding out of the earth, the image of enthusiasm. Thus the ancient kings made music in order to honor merit and offered it with splendor to the supreme deity, inviting their ancestors to be present, but obviously more ceremonial. Blowfold. This hexagram symbolizes thunder over the earth. The ancient rulers venerated heaven's gifts with solemn music, and they sacrificed abundantly to the supreme Lord of heaven in order to be worthy of their ancestors. Lu, thunder arising from the earth symbolizes happiness. The ancient kings composed music to honor virtue, offering it to God and the spirits of their ancestors. Ritsima/Karcher, thunder issuing forth from earth impetuously, providing for, the early kings used a rousing delight to extol actualizing Tao, exalting worship's supreme above, using equalizing the grandfather predecessors. That is a mouthful. Actualizing Tao is the ability to follow the course traced by the ongoing process of the cosmos, linked with acquire, D, acquiring that which makes a being become what it is meant to be. Cleary 1, when thunder emerges, the earth stirs. Thus did the kings of yore make music to honor virtue, offering it in abundance to God, thereby to share it with their ancestors. Wu, thunder breaks out above the earth with a boom. This is merriment. Thus the ancient kings used music to praise virtuous accomplishments and made grand offerings to the Supreme Being to be accompanied by their ancestors. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Enthusiasm shows one dynamic line inspiring responsive obedience in all of the others. Devoted obedience takes action. Such obedient action conforms to natural law and creates order and discipline in the people. The planets and the seasons follow their natural cycles. The sages similarly obey the laws of their nature, and the people acknowledge their regulations and punishments as just. Leg. Enthusiasm shows harmony and contentment throughout the kingdom, a time when the people rejoice in their sovereign and readily obey him. At such a time, his appointments and any military undertakings would be hailed and supported. Because he is close to the fifth place of dignity, the dynamic fourth line is seen as the chief executive officer of the ruler. The ruler has confidence in him, and all of the magnetic lines yield their obedience. Obedience is the attribute of the lower trigram, which here takes the initiative and uses movement, which is the attribute of the upper trigram. The symbolism of the image is more obscure than usual. The use of music at sacrifices is supposed to assist in producing the union between God and his worshippers, as well as the present and past generations. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Delegate authority and gather your forces. The superior man synchronizes his will with the intent of the self via the principles of the work. Enthusiasm is the reverse of the preceding hexagram of temperance. In temperance, we saw the calm strength of a mountain concealed within the earth. In enthusiasm, we see thunder exploding out of the ground into the sky. The strength that was formerly tempered and restrained is now released. It is significant to note that while every line of temperance is more or less favorable, every line of enthusiasm is either negative or cautionary. Even the generally positive fourth line carries a hint of warning about doubt. Negatively, self-deception, the passion of true believers, seems to be what this hexagram is portraying. The figure often suggests a callow or diluted buoyancy, the kind of outlook associated with romantic idealists. In its most negative aspect, enthusiasm is intemperance, the exact opposite of the moderation and restraint shown in the preceding hexagram. The behavior of an untrained Great Dane puppy suddenly bursting into a formal dinner party could be described as enthusiasm, but hardly a desirable form thereof. The lower trigram of obedient devotion has suddenly employed the action and energy of the upper trigram of thunderous shock to express itself. This is inconsistent with the code of the superior man. Conversely, in its most positive sense, enthusiasm suggests the surety of total self-confidence. Blowfold translates this as repose, explaining that the name was suggested to him by his Chinese advisors. We begin to understand this subtle distinction when we compare the seemingly obscure connection with music in the image with a passage from Chuang Tzu. He who understands the music of heaven lives in accordance with nature in his life and takes part in the process of change of things in his death. In repose, his character is in harmony with the yin principle. In activity, his movement is in harmony with the yang principle. Therefore, he who understands the music of heaven is not blamed by heaven or criticized by men. It is said, in action he is like heaven. In repose he is like the earth. Because his mind has found repose, therefore the creation pays homage to him. To understand the music of heaven is to attain repose, which is another way of describing the tranquility that comes with furthering the intent of the self. The only dynamic line in the hexagram is in the minister's place, just below the fifth line ruler. He has the confidence of his sovereign, and his actions therefore accord with heaven. We can turn to the Stoics to find an illustration of this idea. In Epictetus, my will is simply that which comes to pass, for I esteem what God wills better than what I will. To him will I cleave as his minister and attendant, having the same movements, the same desires, in a word, the same will as he. Thus we see that the hexagram can describe either one of two opposite conditions: the intemperate enthusiasm of ego confidence, a synonym of self-deception, or the calm repose of true self-confidence, capitalized. The 15th and 16th hexagrams, each the inverse of the other, represent magnetic and dynamic aspects of the same general idea. Enthusiasm, when it emanates from the self, is just temperance in action. In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, 64, unfinished business. Other titles might be before completion, the symbol of what is not yet past, not yet forwarding, not yet completed, tasks yet to be completed, not yet, yet to be, before the end, mission yet unaccomplished, state of transition, judgment leg. Unfinished business suggests successful progress, but if the young fox that has nearly crossed the stream gets his tail wet, there will be no advantage. Wilhelm Baines. Before completion, success, but if the little fox, after nearly completing the crossing, gets his tail in the water, there is nothing that would further. Blofeld. Before completion, success. Before the little fox has quite completed its crossing of the ice, its tail gets wet. This implies that we are to expect a setback in our plans. No goal or destination is favorable now. Hence, this is a time for waiting and for drawing in our horns. That the last of the 64 hexagrams should be before completion rather than after completion, number 63, may seem surprising until it is recalled that there is nothing final about it. The cycle of change continues, passing from hexagram 64 onto the first hexagram, and so on eternally. Lou, before completion, success. A young fox almost gets its tail wet in the water, nothing benefits. Ritzema/Karcher, not yet fording, growing, the small fox, a muddy ford, soaking one's tail without direction, harvesting. Without direction, harvesting, Wu Yu Li, is no plan or direction is advantageous. In order to take advantage of the situation, do not impose a direction on events. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of being on the edge of an important change of situation. It emphasizes that waiting and accumulating energy to begin the upcoming move is the adequate way to handle it. The image, leg, fire over water, the image of unfinished business. The superior man carefully discriminates among the qualities of things and the different positions they naturally occupy. Wilhelm, fire over water, the image of the condition before transition. Thus, the superior man is careful in the differentiation of things so that each finds its place. Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes fire above water. The superior man takes care to distinguish between things before arranging them in order. Lu, fire above water symbolizes before completion. The superior man carefully distinguishes distinguishes things and puts them in their appropriate place. Ritsuma/Karcher, fire located above stream, not yet fording. The Chunsu, or chief son or superior person, uses considering to mark off the beings residing on all sides. Something in a meditation I had right before doing this reading was around the idea of being a cosmic organism and us being like brain cells or synapses, connections. And when you start seeing your reflection in other people in various ways, or it brings out something of your internal world that kind of harmonizes with what they're going through, it's almost like mapping connections within a brain. And so I think one of the reasons a lot of cultures don't like or frown on lying, for instance, or misrepresentation of any kind is, I would think that, you know, a house divided against itself can't stand. A person in internal conflict with themselves is basically just going around self-sabotaging. But you put that on a grander scale, and, you know, nobody trusts anyone else, and we don't see the importance of our connections. It's almost like we focus more on the individuals rather than that kind of entanglement between them, which I think should be highlighted. And when you can get a feel for entanglement on a wide spectrum and broad area, it's easier to feel secure because you're not just one little ship in the ocean, you're the whole wide ocean, that kind of feel. You can sense the waves in all of its parts, and you feel your place. You don't need to fight for anything, really, because what wants to fight for a particular thing often means I win and you lose, which, if you're in a system, in a body, for instance, if you have things like that happening, then, you know, people get cancer and stuff like that, where you're just, things are growing out of control in ways that are harmful to the body and can't be stopped, you know. You have too much energy going into one location and it becomes eventually toxic to the body. So the idea of equal exchange also is something that comes to mind, that without hiding and attempting to be what society says is the right type of person, for instance, not to say that all morals are not appropriate, but to say that finding one's own inner source of their sense of their own life and what is good or bad in any given instance largely is something they have to develop a sense of within themselves, and that is not from external force, it is from internal discovery. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Progress and success are suggested by the magnetic fifth line in the ruler's place. Although he has nearly crossed the stream, the young fox has not yet escaped from the midst of danger and calamity. Getting his tail wet means that the end does not reflect the intent of the beginning. Although the places of the different lines are not those appropriate to them, yet a dynamic and a magnetic line always respond to each other. Leg. Unfinished business is the reverse of completion. It means that the successful accomplishment of the matter at hand has not yet been realized. The crossing of the great stream is as yet incomplete. Some have wished that the I Ching might have concluded with completion, and the last hexagram have left us with the picture of human affairs all brought to good order. But this would not have been in harmony with the idea of change. Again and again, it has been pointed out that we find in the book no idea of a perfect and abiding state, just as the season's like an ocean, right? So being super fixed or tied to the ground of the ocean, the ocean floor, the seabed. You know, you might have to abandon your anchors at times and find an internal balance amongst the wideness of the ocean, as opposed to demanding that you stay in a very particular place while a lot of shifting and changing is occurring. Again and again, it has been pointed out that we find in the book no idea of a perfect and abiding state. Just as the seasons of the year change and pursue an ever-recurring round, so it is with the phases of society. The reign of order has peaked and declined, and this hexagram calls us to renew the struggle to make things right again. It deals with the conduct necessary to secure this result. Not one of the lines in the hexagram is in its correct place. All the dynamic lines are in magnetic places, and the magnetic lines are in dynamic places. At the same time, each of them has a proper correlate, so there is the possibility of some progress. The symbol of the fox suggests a want of caution on the part of those who try to remedy prevailing disorders. They are unsuccessful and thereby get themselves into trouble. Line 2 represents this state of mind. He is dynamic in a magnetic place in the center of the trigram of peril, which was one of our changing lines. He is restless and attracted by his magnetic correlate in the 5th place. He will be incautious in taking action. The outcome of the issue will be different than what was intended at the beginning. The trigram of water is below and fire above, showing how the two principles cannot act on each other profitably. This symbolizes the unregulated condition of general affairs now prevailing. Notes and paraphrases judgment. Although many achievements fuel our growth, the ego is only the facilitator, not the doer. To ignore this truth creates negative consequences. Don't destroy the work. The superior man critically examines the situation and rechecks his priorities. This hexagram represents the time before the climax of a cycle, just as the preceding figure symbolizes the time after the climax, and hence the transition to a new beginning. The work is by no means almost over. The lines all match as correlates, but every one of them unites upside down, so to speak. Turn the hexagram over, and then they are in perfect correlation. That the superior man discriminates among the qualities of things and the different positions they naturally occupy means that he knows that the correct positions of the lines, the ones they naturally occupy, are as in hexagram number 63, not this one. This backward correlation of lines is arguably a fair image of the relationship of thoughts and feelings in the average human psyche. The stresses of life are what eventually break up these mismatched correlates through endless cycles of stimulus and response until they finally all unite correctly in a hypothetical completion of the great work. That this is an ideal rather than a humanly attainable goal is suggested in this quote from Carl Jung. The principle of the way finds its full development in heaven, the principle of heaven in earth, the principle of earth in the myriad things, and that of the myriad things in man. One who knows how the principles of heaven, earth, and all things find their full development in man can give full development to his people. For all practical purposes, it is wisest to aspire to attainable completions and realize that the work's full development is the self's, not the ego's, responsibility. A quote from Jung in the Tavistock lectures. To strive for perfection is a high ideal, but I say, fulfill something you are able to fulfill rather than run after what you will never achieve. Nobody is perfect. Remember the saying, none is good but God alone, Luke 18:19, and nobody can be. It is an illusion. We can modestly strive to fulfill ourselves and to be as complete human beings as possible, and that will give us trouble enough. The judgment suggests that before any climax or resolution, there may still exist an indeterminate amount of free choice to influence the outcome. Only only the specific circumstances can suggest how much or how little. As always, the choices are defined within the structure of the situation. The magnetic ruler in the fifth place implies that a favorable outcome is possible, but only through clear perception and willpower can it come about. The conditional interpretation, boldface italics added, in both Legg's and Wilhelm's translation of the judgment is necessary for its text to make sense. Note that Ritzmo/Karcher define without direction, harvesting, as no plan or direction is advantageous. In order to take advantage of the situation, do not impose a direction on events. This is a common oracle response and sharpens the meaning here. Line 1 depicts the negative consequences of ignoring the judgment's explicit message. Flow with the changes. Next, we will look at the changing lines 2 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. The birds are waking up. Hexagram 16, enthusiasm. Changing line 2. Leg. The second line, magnetic, shows one who is firm as a rock. She sees a thing without waiting till it has come to pass. With her firm correctness, there will be good fortune. Wilhelm/Baines, firm as a rock, not a whole day. Perseverance brings good fortune. Blofeld, unmoved as a rock. Before the end of day, righteous persistence will bring good fortune. Unmoved as a rock because of the repose which results from absolute confidence in a decision already taken. Lu, firm and stable like a rock, do not wait a whole day. Continuing brings good fortune. Ritzmo/Karcher, chainmail tending towards petrification. Not completing the day, trial significant. Slofnacy, scratched on a rock, not to the end of the day, determination is auspicious. Cleary 1, firm as a rock, not procrastinating, rectitude is good. Wu, he is upright like a rock. In less time than the passing of the day, he discriminates the good from the bad. To be persevering is auspicious. Commentary, Confucius/like. This is shown by the central and correct position of the line. Wilhelm/Baines, because it is central and correct. Blofeld, this is indicated by the suitable position of this line, which is central to the lower trigram. Ritzmo/Karcher, using centering, correcting indeed. Cleary 2, it is balanced in the right way. Wu, because he is central and correct. The master said, does not he who knows the inception of things possess spirit like wisdom? The superior man, in his intercourse with the high, uses no flattery, and in his intercourse with the low, no coarse freedom. Does not this show that he knows the inception of things? Those beginnings are the slight stirrings of movement, and the earliest indications of good fortune or ill. The superior man sees them and acts accordingly without waiting for the delay of a single day. As is said in the I Ching, he is firm as a rock and acts without waiting for the delay of a single day. With firm goodness, there will be good fortune. Firm as a rock, how should he have to wait a single day to ensure his knowing those beginnings and his course? The superior man knows the minute and the minute and the manifested. He knows what is weak and what is strong. He is a model to 10,000. Leg. The magnetic second line is in her correct central position in the lower trigram. Quietly and firmly, she is able to abide in her place and exercise a far-seeing discrimination. All is indicative of good fortune. Notes and paraphrases, Sue. The man is quiet but firm as a rock, yet sensitive to the first imperceptible signs of impending changes. He does not delay in taking action. Wing. To be able to recognize the early signs of a change in fortune is a tremendous gift. While others may be swept away by compelling rhythms and fads, you adhere firmly to the underlying principles of your nature and react appropriately to the demands of the time. Such is the behavior of leaders. Editor. All translations except Legge and Cleary's render the second sentence in the imagery of not waiting for a whole day to pass, which suggests action taken on the basis of foresight, premonition, or intuition. This line is sometimes an injunction to follow your common sense, saying in effect that an oracle is unnecessary to proclaim the obvious. Quote from Bob Dylan, "You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows." James DeCorn breaks changing line 2 down into two succinct possible definitions, A and B. A, proper discrimination knows when to act and when to refrain from action. And B, your own intuition already knows the answer to your query. And changing line 6. Legge. The sixth line, magnetic, shows its subject with darkened mind devoted to the pleasure and satisfaction of the time. But if she changes her course, even when it may be considered as completed, there will be no error. Wilhelm/Bain's deluded enthusiasm. But if after completion one changes, there is no blame. Blofeld. Madcap repose. Unfortunately, a change takes place, so no blame is involved. It says fortunately, not unfortunately. Madcap repose implies being tardy to the point of extreme rashness in the face of approaching danger or of a need to act. Liu, deluded happiness, change after completion, no blame. Ritzinger/Karcher, dim providing for, accomplishment, possessing denial, without fault. Slofnessy, dark excess. If complete, perhaps you will be informed. There is no trouble. Clary 1, obvious in joy. What comes about has change. There is no blame. Clary 2, what has come about changes, etc. Wu, merriment is obscured. There may be success, but changes are pending. There will be no error. Commentary, Confucius/Legge. How can one in such a condition continue for long? Wilhelm/Bain's deluded enthusiasm in a high place. How could this last? Blofeld. Since this is a top line, the state of madcap repose cannot possibly last long. Ritzinger/Karcher, dim providing for, located above. Wherefore permitting long living indeed. Clary 2, oblivion in joy is at the top. What can last? Wu, how can the situation continue for long? Legge, the magnetic sixth line at the end of the hexagram is all but lost. The action of the figure is over, and if she postpones changing her evil ways any longer, there is no hope remaining for her. However, there is still a chance of safety if she will but change. Notes and paraphrases, Sue. The man is distracted by pleasure and satisfaction. If he changes after the events of the day have run their course, however, the sober awakening will prevent future errors. Wing. The person in this position is lost in the memory of a compelling and harmonious experience. The time is past, and what is left is empty egotism. Fortunately, reform is possible. There is an opportunity to move on to a situation of new growth. Editor, this line has a similar auspice as that of its improper correlate in line 3. Wilhelm's commentary states, a sober awakening from false enthusiasm is quite possible and very favorable. Note that no blame is mentioned, suggesting that you are more ignorant than culpable in the situation at hand. A quote from Swedenborg in Arcana Coelestia. While he is in a state of bondage, that is while lusts and falsities rule. The man who is subjected by them supposes that he is in a state of freedom, but it is a gross falsity, for at the very time he is carried along by the delight of his lusts, and of the pleasures derived from them, that is, by the delight of his loves, and because it is by a delight it appears to him as free. Everyone thinks himself free while he is being led by some love, so long as he follows whithersoever it leads. James DeCorn breaks changing line 6 into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, conquer your illusions and change your ways. And B, Illusions are shattered when pursued to their logical conclusions. I was thinking about something about that. You know, the idea of reverse psychology. It's almost like mirroring back the extreme of a thing. Or if someone's freaking out, they're taking up all the attention. And the person that would naturally freak out often has to become the supporter of the other person. They don't have a chance to freak out. And so, what did it say? It reminded me of that. So basically, illusions are shattered when pursued to their logical conclusions. So sometimes I feel like a way to get through internally, or even come to a helpful conclusion in a situation at hand with people you're involved with, not always, but is to kind of allow the situation to take place in the way that's most true to you, and you being able to express yourself, obviously not to an excess. You want to step aside if you're in a rage or anything like that, but to go through the things that one would naturally go through without suppressing them, so that that conversation, whether it be internal or external, can have its place and take place. Otherwise, everything feels paused and at a standstill and stuck. Clearly, you know, hopefully this is not also including acts of violence and things like that, but you know, in situations where we're internally struggling and maybe we have an unhealthy addiction or passion, and if I don't mean go through with something, especially if it's going to harm somebody else, but sometimes you can actually even think through or be in just enough position to have potentially what you're seeking. Oftentimes that throws you into the opposite pendulum swing, where now you're like, oh, did I even really want this thing that all of a sudden now I have an opportunity to have? It's almost like we get addicted to wanting and chasing after a thing. And that in itself is mirrored to us when we all of a sudden are confronted with the possibility of this kind of like behind the scenes illusion being shoved in our own face. And then we can start acting in a healthy way often, I find, in my own life. Next, we will go to Liu Yiming's Taoist teaching, which again, he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. 16, Liu Yiming calls joy. It is advantageous to set up a ruler and mobilize the army. Explanation: joy is happiness. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is thunder, active, and below is earth, compliant. Acting in accord with the time, active yet also compliant, it is therefore called joy. This hexagram represents summoning yang by yin. It follows on the previous hexagram, great possession. In great possession, strength and understanding are employed together. It is the path of wealth and daily renewal. For wealth to be daily renewed, it is necessary to act in accord with the time. Only then can one succeed. If one can accord with the time, then the promotion of strength can be correct, and the use of intelligence can be appropriate. The firing process does not go wrong. The measure of the elements is regulated. Haste and relaxation are in order, and advance and withdrawal accord with the appropriate time and measure, reaching effortlessness by way of effort. There is no problem of losing what one has gained. What is the happiness of harmonious action like? As an image of harmonious action, nothing compares to setting up a ruler and mobilizing the army. The ruler is the leader of the nation. The general is the leader of the army. When the leader is set up in accord with the timing of heaven, then the country is peaceful. When the mobilization of the army is in accord with the people's hearts, then the troops are complete. The mind is the leader of the body, like the ruler and the general. As it is beneficial to set up a ruler and mobilize the army for harmonious action, so it is beneficial to rectify the mind and train the body. If one acts in accord with the time, it is beneficial. If one's action is not in accord with the time, it is not beneficial. When it is beneficial, one attains happiness. When it is not beneficial, one is not happy. The path of producing happiness is the consummation of harmonious action. With all of the uncertainty involved in this reading, since James de Corn especially, by kind of drawing it out through the various commentaries, has a lot of warning involved in this, that the enthusiasm could be misplaced, and us acting on it could only worsen things. Not only that, with the unfinished of hexagram 64, our supporting hexagram, this fox on ice, the image that Hilary Barrett brought up, that's shifting underneath it, that's an uncertain situation. So him talking about if the action is correct, it is beneficial. If it's not correct, it's not beneficial. Now would definitely be a time to find out what we're doing and take a good look at where we're stepping. The commentary section for hexagram 16 is back here. We'll also read that before we go to 61. Sometimes there's a little bit more alchemical stuff in the commentary section. Joy, thunder above, earth below. When thunder emerges, the earth stirs, joy. Thus did the kings of yore make music to honor virtue, offering it in abundance to God, thereby to share it with their ancestors. Joy is happiness, above is thunder, below is earth. This is thunder coming from the earth, stirring and rising up. When positive energy prevails harmoniously, all things are pleasantly uplifted by it. This is the image of joy. With all this Aries Mars stuff going on lately, maybe that is this enthusiasm. In spring, the people used to believe that thunder sprung up from the earth and enlivened things. And so that's kind of like the energy it feels like right now, is there's just so much from that undercurrent or that unconscious that's just got pressure, and it almost compels you to act in ways that can be unhealthy, especially if you act before you're settled and seeing clearly. So I would take note of that and how that might be something to consider. You have a tremendous amount of energy that is billowing up from the earth, or bursting from the earth, but where you point it is also quite important, especially now when, you know, the slightest misstep could cause this fox to get his tail wet, and the entire kind of like cycle or venture is inauspicious at that stage. What the kings of yore saw in this was that virtue is what is commanded by heaven and is the root of human life. So it should be a joy to cultivate and practice it. Therefore, they made music to honor virtue. Joy is that whereby virtue is made harmonious. Virtue is that whereby joy is made complete. If one creates enjoyments without honoring virtue, that is called creating enjoyment in the midst of misery. But by using joy to harmonize virtue, the virtue becomes more exalted. By using virtue to create joy, the joy becomes more harmonious. When virtue and joy coincide, this is called true happiness. The richness of the music of that happiness and joy is sufficient to offer to God and to share with the ancestors. Since what God likes is virtue, and what the ancestors like is virtue too, offerings to God and to the ancestors are offerings of virtue. When one creates enjoyment and happiness without losing virtue, This is obeying God and remembering the ancestors. Obeying God is answering heaven. Remembering the ancestors is repaying our debt. When people are born, they receive their lives from God and their bodies from their ancestors. The body is that whereby life is carried. Life is that whereby the body is completed. Since the body and life are inseparable, repaying our debt is answering heaven. Answering heaven is repaying our debt. When we answer heaven and repay our debt, we can be happy. Such is the effect of finding joy in honoring virtue. How can people be happy without honoring virtue? Great question. Now we will look at our supporting hexagram 64, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 64, unsettled. Being as yet unsettled is developmental. A small fox having nearly crossed the river gets its tail wet, does not succeed. Explanation: unsettled means yin and yang are not yet settled. As to the qualities of the hexagram, below is water, a pitfall, and above is fire, bright. Bright on the outside while dark on the inside, causing downfall by brightness, producing brightness because of danger. Yin and yang are awry and do not correspond, so it is called unsettled. This hexagram represents refining the self and repelling yin, waiting for the appropriate time with suppressed yang. It follows on the previous hexagram, predominance of the small. In predominance of the small, activity and stillness are as one. By smallness, yin, one cultivates the path of non-striving. This is done after yin and yang complete and settle each other. Before they are settled, however, it is first necessary to reach all the yins that trap yang. Only after that does true yin manifest and true yang return. So yin and yang balance each other and the gold elixir crystallizes. This is why the work that involves striving, refining the self, and waiting for the time is important. Once people reach the age of 16, heaven and earth commingle. The yang in the middle of heaven enters the palace of earth, so earth is filled and becomes water. The yin in the middle of earth enters the palace of heaven, so heaven is hollowed out and becomes fire. The yin in fire receives the yang energy of heaven. Yin and yang aggregate and it turns into fire. The yang in water receives the yin energy of earth. Yin and yang steam and it becomes water. This fire and water are in the temporal mixing of yin and yang, the confusion of real and artificial. Growing day and night, the warm, gentle fire changes into violent, hot fire, and the water of true unity changes into the water of unbridled lust. Once the nature of fire erupts, the discriminatory consciousness takes charge of affairs and the original spirit withdraws. Once the nature of water acts, the polluted vitality causes trouble and the original vitality is depleted. At this point, people begin to vie for honor, plunder for profit, contest for victory, and seek power, depriving others to benefit themselves, using intellectual brightness outwardly, indulging in emotions, giving free rein to their desires. Deluded by objects of sense, they ravage and abandon themselves. The danger of mundanity being stored within. Bright on the outside, but dark on the inside. They bury the real and accept the false. The human mentality looms dangerously, and the mind of Tao is now faint. Essence is disturbed, life is shaken. Yin and yang are out of harmony. The 5 elements injure one another. All sorts of emotions and cravings are in full force. All sorts of schemes and wiles are there. This is why being unsettled is unsettled. However, being unsettled means not yet having reached settlement. It does not mean settlement is not possible, only that the person has not yet sought that settlement. If one seeks settlement, ultimately it will be possible to be settled. This is why there is a development aspect to being unsettled. But though there is a way of development in an unsettled state, nevertheless, since the negative energy of acquired conditioning has been operative for so long, and the primordial true positivity has sunken so deeply, settlement cannot be effected immediately. The work of self-refinement is necessary before you can see an effect. Self-refinement means refining the human mind. The human mind is the progenitor of all mundanities. Once the human mind is gone, accumulated mundanities evaporate. Light arises in the empty room, and true celestial energy gradually approaches restoration. But before refinement of the self is perfected, the mind is not empty and the light is not true. Negativity and mundanity still have not withdrawn completely, and one cannot seek their end in a hurry. If one does not know the firing process and rushes to achieve settlement, this is still the human mentality acting, working with false understanding. Then the unsettled will never be settled. This is like a small fox having nearly crossed the river, gets its tail wet, and does not succeed. A fox is associated with yin, a creature known for its suspiciousness. Though a small fox is not very suspicious, it cannot be entirely free from doubts. As long as the human mentality is not gone, the mind of Tao does not become manifest. This is like the small fox. Though nearly settled, before reaching settlement, if the refinement of the self is incomplete when settlement is nearly reached, though one wants to go ahead, one instead falls behind. Therefore, practitioners of the Tao, in refining the self, must reach utter emptiness and tranquility. The yin trapping yang, withdrawing completely, before the primordial yang energy comes from within nothingness, and true yin and true yang unite, able to settle what is unsettled. A classic says, if refinement of the self is imperfect, the restored elixir does not crystallize. So we know refinement of the self is the first step in practicing Tao. And the commentary section of 64. Not yet settled, fire above, water below. Fire is above water, not yet settled. Thus superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. Not yet settled means something has not yet reached settlement. Above is fire, below is water. The fire is above water. When fire is above water, the fire cannot heat the water, and the water cannot control the fire. Water and fire in separate places is the image of being not yet settled. What superior people see in this is that once people get mixed up in temporal conditioning, the real is obscured and the artificial comes forth. Body and mind are unstable, vitality and spirit are clouded. Volatility erupts and greed arises. Taking misery for pleasure, they could go to any lengths and become extremely unsettled. Nevertheless, sages have a way of restoring the primordial within the temporal. It is just that people have never thought of this settlement. If they wanted this settlement, they would be capable of settlement. Therefore, superior people carefully discern things and keep them in their places. Things here means the primordial and the temporal, the real and false earthly and celestial. Place means where these things abide. Carefully discerning whether things are real or false, it is necessary to be perfectly clear in mind, with genuine knowledge and perception, free from any doubt or confusion whatsoever. This is the work of investigating things to produce knowledge. In respect to the reality or falsehood of things, keeping them in their places so that the real is recognized as real and the false is recognized as false, and the two are not mixed up, is the science of rectifying the mind and making the intent sincere. When one discerns things and understands truth and also keeps things in their place and does not act recklessly, the mundane and the celestial are not mixed up. The real and the false are distinguished. Then there is settlement in the midst of the unsettled. This is like water conveying moisture and fire conveying heat, each accomplishing what it can accomplish, each on a separate path. The primordial is that whereby the real body is made. The temporal is that whereby the phantasmic body is made. Before the primordial and temporal are settled, the mundane and the celestial are mixed up. The real and the false are confused. If one can distinguish the real from the false, one will know the places of the primordial and the temporal. The temporal has its place in the temporal, which is clearly obvious. One should not mistake something temporal for something primordial and forcibly seek settlement. The words carefully discern have a most profound meaning. Discernment requires investigation and penetration of every subtlety without any carelessness allowed. This is particularly so because the primordial and the temporal are so close that it is easy to mistake them. Only by careful, minute discernment is it possible to recognize truly and know clearly that each has its place. When one knows that each has its place, then one can keep each one in its place. When one can keep each in its place, then the primordial can be preserved and the temporal conditioning will not act up. Then the unsettled can be settled. The true earthly and the true celestial can join. Water and fire commingle, and the spiritual embryo forms. The reasons the sages put the hexagram not yet settled at the end was so that when people are not yet settled, they will investigate the truth and hasten to seek settlement. Next, we will look at our changing lines 2 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. And changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Changing line 2 of our primary hexagram 16, joy. Firm as a rock, not procrastinating, rectitude is good. Explanation, having no greed, no ambition, happy with knowledge of celestial order, solid as a rock, steadfast, not letting external artificialities injure inner reality. When it comes to improper enjoyment, one does not delay in getting rid of it. This is the happiness of preserving rectitude and thus gaining good fortune. And changing line 6. Oblivious in joy. What comes about has change. There is no blame. Explanation, at the end of joy, only knowing how to go along with enjoyment, not knowing how to operate enjoyment in reverse, is called oblivion in joy. When joy reaches oblivion, and one clings obstinately to it and doesn't pass through it, submitting to the enjoyment of what one desires, although what one enjoys comes to be, it must undergo change. When happiness culminates, that gives rise to sadness. After all, it is self-defeating. It is not the fault of other people. This is pursuing what one likes and losing happiness. So happiness as a path is all a matter of compliance. The way to bring about happiness is to be able to act in accord with the time. When one acts in accord with the time, the young energy is expansive, like thunder going out of the earth and rising forcefully into the sky, startling an area of 100 miles with its rumble so that all demons flee. The life-giving potential continues increasing, and the earth is always covered with yellow sprouts. The world blooms with golden flowers. Wherever one may walk, everywhere is the Tao. No happiness is more delightful than this. Next, we will look at what buddy? There he is. Brian Browne Walker has to say in the I Ching, or Book of Changes, Guide to Life's Turning Points. Hexagram 16, our primary hexagram, he calls enthusiasm. You. Proper enthusiasm opens every door. The I Ching teaches that there are two kinds of enthusiasm, one that leads to misfortune and one that leads to success. This hexagram comes as a sign that you can proceed with confidence now if your enthusiasm is properly founded. Improper enthusiasm is fueled by the desires of the ego. People often desire recognition, wealth, power, or freedom from difficulty. Such desires can become so great that we will do anything to achieve them. Our energy rises as we wildly pursue our goal, but this unruly and egotistical enthusiasm inevitably leads us into incorrect and imbalanced behavior and into misfortune. Proper enthusiasm, on the other hand, is fueled by a devotion to attaining and expressing inner balance and inner truth. When your aim is not to influence others or to satisfy your ego, but to follow the guidance of the higher power in all that you do, you acquire another kind of energy, a balanced and bottomless eagerness for living in step with what is right and good. In this, there is true power and true grace. The hexagram I got for this month was grace. This hexagram reminds you that striving out of your ego now will only push you further away from your goals. Seek instead to follow proper principles. Keep to what is innocent, correct, and kind, and the creative will come to your aid. The path of truth is always the path of least resistance. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, the direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 64, before completion. I Ching. The transition from chaos to order depends upon your achieving true inner calm. The image of this hexagram is that of spring, a time when the darkness and decay of winter are about to give way to the light and plenty of summer. The transition is not yet complete. Here it depends upon you strengthening your clarity, calm, and conscientiousness. I Ching often comes as an indication that we have not yet achieved a genuine inner equanimity. As long as we respond to outer pressures with our egos, by worrying, desiring, or becoming aggressive, we cannot attain a successful repose. The I Ching reminds us now to abandon the hysterics of the ego in favor of acceptance, modesty, and inner balance. I Ching denotes a time of great responsibility. In a very real sense, it can be said that the state of the world depends upon your thoughts and conduct now. Wow. The external world will only come into order if the inner world has done so. Therefore, seek now to correct whatever in yourself is at odds with the principles of the sage. Quiet your ego, make humility and acceptance your primary goals, and move forward like a fox walking on ice, cautiously, deliberately, and gently. By persevering in what is true and good, you build the foundation upon which good fortune can come to rest. And our changing lines, next we will read, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. And changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Hexagram 16, changing line 2. Recognize the beginnings of improper action. The superior person corrects herself while it is still easy to do so. And changing line 6. Inferior notions lead you toward misfortune. Self-correction can still make possible a success. All right, now we will get the secret hexagram by looking at the second, third, and fourth lines of our primary hexagram and the third, fourth, and fifth lines of our supporting hexagram. So that would be broken, broken, solid, which is Gen Mountain for our bottom line of our secret hexagram, and then broken, solid, broken for our top line, which would be Con Water. So Con Water above Gen Mountain give us the secret hexagram. $39, which I-ming calls halting, trouble, preserving the primordial in the midst of the temporal. There's a lot of warning in these. I want to read from I-ming for this because of the alchemical help. And then probably also Benabel Wynn and Browne Walker, thinking. 39, halting, trouble. When halted, the southwest is beneficial, not the northeast. It is profitable to see a great person. Innocence is auspicious. Explanation. Halting means forward progress is difficult. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is water, dangerous, and below is mountain, stopping. Stopping in the midst of danger, it is therefore called halting. This hexagram represents preserving the primordial in the midst of the temporal. It follows on the previous hexagram, people in the home. In people in the home, illumination is not used outwardly. It is the work of refining the self. Refining the self is only refining the acquired yin. From the time people lose the primordial and temporal conditioning takes charge, the human mind is perilous, like the two yins being outside one yang in water. The mind of Tao is faint, like the one yang fallen between two yins in water. The yang, with yang fallen into yin, the mind of Tao is burdened by the human mentality and cannot manifest actively. It is all the human mind that does things. This is the extreme of danger. But as long as there is danger, it is necessary to be able to stop in danger. If one can stop in danger, then the human mentality gradually evaporates and the mind of Tao gradually grows. It is possible thereby to deal with danger and to leave danger without being injured by the negative energy of acquired conditioning. The statement, when halted, the southwest is beneficial, not the northeast, is precisely the secret of dealing with the danger and leaving danger. The southwest is the province of earth, the homeland of utter emptiness and complete stillness. Utter emptiness beckons fulfillment. When stillness is complete, then action goes into motion. The primordial energy comes from within empty nothingness. As the mind of Tao appears, the human mind naturally recedes. This is the place that gives life to the self, so it is called beneficial. The northeast is the direction of mountain, where yin energy has nearly stripped yang completely away. Yin energy stripping away yang, following its desires, the human mind takes charge of affairs, and the mind of Tao is on the verge of disappearance. This is the place that kills the self, so it is called not beneficial. It is beneficial to enliven the mind of Tao and withdraw the human mind. It is not beneficial to arouse the human mind and damage the mind of Tao. If you enliven the mind of Tao, then you can deal with danger. If you can withdraw the human mind, then you can get out of danger. So the fact that it is surely profitable to see a great person and innocence is auspicious is because a great person is one who has not lost the mind of an infant. The mind of an infant does not discriminate or cognize, has no greed or ambition. This is the mind of Tao. When one has the mind of Tao, one is a great person. Without the mind of Tao, one is a petty person. Getting rid of the human mentality is not possible without seeing the mind of Tao. Only when seeing the mind of Tao can one get rid of the human mind. So it is profitable to see a great person simply means it is beneficial to see the mind of Tao. Once one has seen the mind of Tao, false and true are distinguished. At peace, in accord, essence is stabilized and feelings forgotten. No longer seduced by the human mentality, by stillness one can control danger, and by action one can solve danger. Stillness and action are both functions of the mind of Tao. Meeting danger with rectitude, maintaining rectitude in the midst of danger, eventually one will surely get out of danger, resolve danger, and fulfill the great path, completing it auspiciously. Especially in intense readings, this one's pretty essential. It's like almost like an energy map, if nothing else. 39 in the commentary section next says, Halting, waters above, mountain below. There is water atop a mountain, halting. Thus do superior people examine themselves and cultivate virtue. Halting means there is difficulty and one cannot proceed onward. Above is water, below is mountain. There is water atop a mountain. A mountain is high and is very earthy. Add water on top of that, and earthiness is strong while the celestial is weak. This is the image of halting. What superior people see in this is that when people are unable to make progress on the path of sages, it is because they are competitive and contentious, emotional and greedy, not knowing how to improve themselves and correct their errors. Therefore, superior people examine themselves and cultivate virtue. If one is incapable of self-examination, one will not have self-mastery and will be subject to manipulation. Every act, every step will entail danger and difficulty, will involve injury to life. Only by self-examination can one abandon the false and enter the real. Not being deluded by externals, with every step one's feet then tread the real ground, and virtue can be cultivated. When virtue is cultivated, one's nature is stabilized and feelings are forgotten, so that one is unshakable and unwavering as a mountain. Not halted by obstacles, one cannot be injured by difficulties and troubles. But the work of self-examination and cultivation of virtue requires clear knowledge of the image of the hexagram. The water is above, the mountain is below. The water being above means that the danger that causes halting is external, while the mountain being below means that developmental cultivation is internal. Seeing there is danger, if one can then use that danger to cultivate character, then even though the situation be dangerous, the mind is not in danger. Outwardly there is danger, but inwardly it is not dangerous. The danger lies elsewhere, while cultivation of virtue and character lies in oneself. Using virtue to ward off danger, danger dissolves. Using danger to cultivate character, virtuous action grows daily more lofty. So obstacles cannot faze one. Indeed, it is after being halted by obstacles that one can cultivate character and virtue. If students can recognize the reality of self-examination, there is no need to worry about halting, and no need to worry about inability to develop virtue. And then also Benabel Wynn. God, also Hilary Barrett is so good. Probably have to throw her in the mix too. This is important. 39. Benabel Wynn calls An impasse. Jian, the Oracle. Progress comes to a standstill. Every movement forward is blocked by an opposing force. Personal difficulties. When extenuating circumstances physically obstruct your path, yield to the standstill and take pause. Channel a power far beyond the reach of that obstruction, which we have in our primary hexagram of enthusiasm, thunder bursting out of the earth. And with, all this Mars energy going on. Channel a power far beyond the reach of that obstruction and grow it outward from within. This can only be achieved in stillness, beneficence, and calm. A favorable outcome when water carves its path through the depth of its A favorable outcome when water carves its path through the depth of its obstruction. Water seeks movement and momentum. The mountain seeks to remain still. An impasse. The sage cultivates virtue through self-reflection. The southwest is advantageous, the northeast is not. Good auspices to the queen, the mother, the farmer, the artisan, and the masses. Challenges faced by the politicians, the builders, the architects, and the scholars. Small towns and the countryside bring good fortune. Hills, mountains, forests, and dark caverns bring misfortune. It serves your endeavor to seek out the eminent one. When wise counsel has been sought out, it will be auspicious to proceed with your endeavor. Peril above, peril below. Adversity and troubles, take caution. Stay true to the way of the sages, and the ending will be well. The theme of the southwest being advantageous and the northeast being ill-advised first appeared in the oracle message for hexagram 2. Then again, Browne Walker. Short and sweet. Never been compelled to read this many for the Secret Hexagram, but this is like such a critical time, it appears, based on this. Qian, obstruction. Surrounded by obstructions, one must first retreat, then seek the direction of the sage. There's an old saying which fits this hexagram: you are caught between a rock and a hard place. That was the situation of our changing line too, in hexagram 16, enthusiasm, or joy. The person was either in a cave or with their back against a rock, which in that situation seemed like it was a good thing because they were stable and they could stay in that spot. And by the end of the day, success would come as long as they were firm and correct. But also, it sounded like they should act. And yet with the caution of our supporting hexagram, like the fox attempting to cross the great river on ice, it's like a carefulness is 100% necessary. So yeah, it's interesting that came out, the rock and the hard place thing. In other words, you are surrounded by obstructions. As much as you may want to blame others for the difficulty, in all likelihood, the true obstruction is in your own thinking. What is called for now is a retreat into self-examination and self-correction. Emotions of desire, fear, or anger may tempt you to take action now, but do not be seduced. The presence of these strong feelings is proof that you are off balance and need to steady yourself. With all this energy, like I said, feels exactly that way. It's like a powder keg scenario. As long as you try to forcibly achieve external results, rather than carefully following higher truth step by step, you will be obstructed from making personal progress. Whenever we indulge in judgments about others, we obstruct our own peace of mind and progress. We should choose instead to see the best in others, allowing them to come and go as they will, and turn our energies inward towards self-improvement. Often the faults in our own thinking are revealed only with the aid of others. You would be wise now to seek the advice of a qualified counselor or truth-minded friend. Retreat, self-examination, and self-correction will remove the obstructions that block your path now. In a reading I just shared from Witch and Scythe, she was talking about a lot of, this was like 3-4 months ago. I think it was December when she did this reading, but she said a lot of the astrologers that she followed were talking about it was going to be important in this new, Aquarian age stuff that we're entering or in, to collaborate and work together, and that was going to be almost essential. Now, on this side of things, and kind of like how I've been building this channel, it felt like that's been very highly focused on. I sense that anybody that's somewhat empathic gets a sense of trying to feel out a room when they enter it. If you imagine being so connected to the world in the way that we are, we're in just one big room where all of us are in it together. And sensing that room out, we're, sensing each other out, and we're connecting. And there's bound to be conflict when that happens, and sensitivities, and the need to step carefully, especially in world conflict, and the need to work together in a harmonious way that brings mutual advantage and stability is essential right now. Hexagram 39 in Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, limping. This is you the Great. He could transform into a bear. Key questions. Where can you find help? How could you see the obstacles differently? Can you imagine going a different way? Oracle. Limping, fruitful in the southwest, not fruitful in the northeast. Fruitful to see great people, constancy, good fortune. When life has become an uphill struggle, it's wise to fall back to the southwest. The southwest represents a realm of friendly allies and sun-warmed fields. The northeast is dark and mountainous, the way of calling and adventure. So this is a time to take a step back from the struggle and connect with people more than with ideals. Even if the responsibility is yours alone, the work need not be. Really facing a problem means being prepared to tackle it in a different way, not just trudging doggedly onwards until the path peters out beneath your feet. Seeing great people helps you to keep traveling towards your long-term vision despite the obstacles and course corrections. You may literally find a great person with the experience and wisdom to reorient you. You may be guided by an inner vision of human potential. You, the Great, the hero who conquered the floods, toiled for years to build dikes and dredge rivers and was left with a limp. But he succeeded in the end because of what he did differently, enlisting the help of people and spirits and honoring the flow of the water. I think there's the idea of a limping old man, like a sage or a shaman, who goes through some sort of like profoundly destabilizing event, maybe in their early childhood. Often, in this case, obviously it wasn't early childhood, but in the case of Jacob wrestling with the angel, that was later in his life, and he was left with a limp. So these stories of these people that kind of go through a big challenge, in that there's a lot of potential for cultivation and a rebirth of sorts, but also it's that very stage that we're at in this reading that is very, very crucial to act correctly, like I-ming put it. If it's correct, then it's beneficial. If it's not correct, it's not beneficial. So the focus critically needs to be on what is correct, and that being in any given moment what it says here, what the sage would do in that time. When life has become an uphill struggle, it's wise to, we already read that. You, the great, the hero who conquered the floods, toiled for years to build dikes and dredge rivers and was left with a limp, but he succeeded in the end because of what he did differently, enlisting the help of people and spirits and honoring the flow of the water. Image, above the mountain there is water, limping. A noble one turns himself around to renew his character. That honoring the flow of the water, what I was talking about earlier too, is the idea of not being anchored in the ocean, that not trying to stay in one spot, but to feel the flow and sense that we may think of ourselves very narrowly of what we are, but despite how we view ourselves, it doesn't change the fact of what we actually are, which is far greater than we could even possibly put some sort of box or label over. And so when we confine ourselves to a very restricted way of being and acting in the world and our view of ourselves, it can be scary when we're on a choppy sea, and we may lose our bearings a bit. But especially in times like that, it's important to find, a still center within and a balance point within rather than without. And that was also something talked about in our one of the last commentaries on this Secret Hexagram, which is the hidden influence behind the situation. It's like bottom deck energy if you're a tarot reader. So the stability and balance is something that if we can cultivate that, even though that's Louis Ming who said it, even though the danger is external, internally and within the mind, or you might say the psyche, if you can create an inner balance, then internally there is no danger. The danger is merely external, but it's all about finding that balance and that flow. Image, above the mountain there is water, limping. A noble one turns himself around to renew his character. The path ahead is hard and dangerous, and it is time to find another way. The clouds that rise above the mountain become the stream flowing down it. It changes course lightly and easily. Naturally finding a path of least resistance, always in motion. Embodying the qualities of mountain and stream, the noble one will join the firmness of his inner resolve with fluid commitment, renewing his strength of character by turning his whole self around. Sequence from Hexagram 38, opposition. Turning away naturally means hardship, and so limping follows. When you are alienated from others, life is hard. Nothing is provided for you. Everything comes only by your own effort. You struggle, and it is time to look southwest. Pair. Limping forms a pair with release. Hexagram 40. Release means letting things take their time. Limping means hardship. Release is a time of flow. This is a time of struggle. Release is free to follow a chosen path. Limping is unavoidably handicapped and obstructed. And yet, limping is also the time for turning yourself around and finding another way. And that contains the potential for release. I will put the link to that reading that Witch Inside did in the description box below that I referenced earlier. In the last reading I did, we kind of had an analogy of that Eye of the Serpent Tarot, Helen of Eye of the Serpent Tarot talked about if when you are going to climb a mountain, it's helpful to have a team to do that. It's not something you take on your own. And bringing that full circle around with what Witch and Scythe talked about what these astrologers are saying about it being essential to be able to coordinate and co-create and collaborate, those kinds of things. It's almost like if what we truly are is all one, then the divisions need not be something we over-focus on. Yes, we're in bodies and all of that stuff, and it very much seems to the body and to a very limited perception of consciousness that we are separate. But when you think of things in terms of quantumly interconnected, entangled energies, that's all fluid. That's all, we all share what Jung called the collective unconscious. And so there are no hard boundaries there. We all share a very mysterious space together that really is something that is influenced by the Tao, nature, life, the flow, just this happening that we can't quite quantify, regardless of how much we want to try and put a name on every possible little thing. We come to a point where it is more important to focus on the connections and what you might call the oneness, or the all-encompassing beingness of what is, that yes, this body shares in, but it cannot be removed from what is. It's a part of it. And to see oneself as a representative of that, like an ambassador, you might call it. It's kind of like each person walks around as this ambassador of consciousness. And to do an ambassador's job correctly, one must be able to have in mind and in action the ideals and concerns of the self or the country or whoever is behind this ambassador as the things that they act on and hold value in. If they have their own kind of intentions and are working behind the scenes to kind of like ego their own shit out, that's the idea of an ego that's gotten full control of the ship and the steering, and thinks that it's safest to throw an anchor into the sea and to stay in one position when you're in the midst of this flowing unconscious water. Yes, there's a mountain there that's, there's a firmness, but in this secret hexagram, the hidden influence behind the situation is the water is above that. And in that kind of a situation, like Hilary Barrett talked about, it's more important to seek connection than ideals. And so bringing all of this out and trying to come up with some sort of summation for the thing, I would say that we're in a time that is very critical that we find the tightrope that we're walking. If it's swaying about, we need to maintain balance. It sounds like, based on the changing line 2, that it wouldn't last even past the day as long as correct action was going to take place, that we're almost, with Supporting Hexagram 64, unfinished, unsettled, that implies that we're almost across. Not yet across doesn't mean not crossing necessarily. It just means not quite there yet, which means also it could be that there's, like changing line 2 suggests, a little bit left to, while we've got our back up against this rock. What Browne Walker said, between a rock and a hard place with our secret hexagram, it sounds like the most important thing to do is to not make any drastic changes or actions. One of the things we read said, do not seek to influence events at this time. So unless someone is just so incredibly intuitively and infallibly certain on what their right course is, it would be safest to try and maintain balance. And, like when there's a ton of energy swelling up into you, it's not always the best time to make rash, drastic changes in our lives, or to confront anyone about anything, or any of that. It's kind of a time to kind of weather the storm, as it were, and attempt to not be shaked around by what the ego would suggest is the safest, best way to deal with the situation. There's this experiment that was done, and the idea is that if you Rochambeau or do rock, paper, scissors with somebody, you're up against another person, and you can either both people agree to work together, and then you'll both get double the reward. Or if you decide to work with this person and they decide not to work with you, they win and you lose, but that person gets a single reward and the other person gets nothing. And so going into that kind of situation, it's almost like, well, if I just always chose myself and not the team, then I'd always get what I needed and it would be fine. But we're not just ourselves. It is a situation where we're in a team, that this greater ecosystem that we're a part of demands of us that we be in a sort of dance, a flow, that we sense that this kind of puppet that is filled with like that, the Tao, or the collective unconscious, is going to sort of act out, especially based on being conditioned for so long in the human mentality. It's likely most often going to act egotistically. And until we can carve out a space within that, kind of like that cave that was talked about, potentially could be our secret hexagram, is remaining in a cave, till we can carve out a safe space for this emptiness to reside in, that can house the Tao, it's plugged up with ego shit. There's no room to take in the strangers. In the Bible, it talks about, in those cultures at the time, taking in a stranger, and still to this day in many cultures, is something that you honor. It's a sacred thing because you don't know who you're taking in. In Hinduism, one of the things I read, one of these books, talked about that the reincarnated deity essentially could be anyone, and it really is all of us. It's everything that's happening. But with that attitude, there were all these people that were bickering, and I think the manager came and reminded them, hey, he said, I think, that one person among you is this, high sage, or this reincarnated version of this deity. And so they all acted differently when that was the case. They recognized that it could be any one of us, because this deity would often be someone you wouldn't necessarily expect. It wouldn't be somebody, it wouldn't be an obvious situation. It could potentially be some person you least expected, for instance. And it could be Humperdink, for instance. So a Humperdink among us being recognized as this could be God, or God in flesh, which again, that's what's going on here, the embodiment of all of this, and all of this is that dance of Shakti, right? That's beingness in manifestation, boom, clipping along in pace with these changes that are going on. That being the case, if we acted with that in mind, instead of just, I'm more to be concerned about myself and my separation from the whole and keeping myself safe, even to the endangerment of the group. If you were in a group, let's say, and your highest ideal God or the embodiment of that God were with you, I think that would change how you thought about that scientific experiment of just, oh, me or you. That being the case with each and every one of us, including Humperdink, means that the course of action we take absolutely needs to be one of honoring life, being life-affirming, being patient while we wait out the storm a bit, being balanced, and choosing connection over ideals. Changing line 6 had to do with, sounded like, if I remember correctly, getting carried away potentially in egotistical concerns. I'll read really quick from James DeCorn's Gnostic Book of Changes. Again, the changing lines, the quick little bottom parts of each of them, so that we have those summed up real quick. I'll do the notes and paraphrases too. Changing line 2, notes and paraphrases. Sue, the man is quiet but firm as a rock, yet sensitive to the first imperceptible signs of impending changes. He does not delay in taking action. Wing, to be able to recognize the early signs of a change in fortune is a tremendous gift. While others may be swept away by compelling rhythms and fads, you adhere firmly to the underlying principles of your nature and react appropriately to the demands of the time. Such is the behavior of leaders. Editor, all translations except Legge and Cleary's render the second sentence in the imagery of not waiting for a whole day to pass, which suggests action taken on the basis of foresight, premonition, or intuition. This line is sometimes an injunction to follow your common sense, saying in effect that an oracle is unnecessary to proclaim the obvious. And a quote from Bob Dylan, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. He breaks changing line 2 down into 2 succinct possible definitions, A and B. A, proper discrimination knows when to act and when to refrain from action. And B, your own intuition already knows the answer to your query. And then changing line 6, notes and paraphrases. Sue, the man is distracted by pleasure and satisfaction. If he changes after the events of the day have run their course, however, the sober awakening will prevent future errors. Wing, the person, so we don't just sit and wait out the situation, we also need to reflect internally and make sure the reasons behind what's compelling us to act in any particular way and investigate the root cause of things. Is that root cause some ego mission, right? Ego-related mission or ideal rather than something that has a bit more substance to it. Wing, the person in this position is lost in the memory of a compelling and harmonious experience. The time is past, and what is left is empty egotism. Fortunately, reform is possible. There is an opportunity to move on to a situation of new growth. Editor, this line has a similar auspice as that of its improper correlate in line 3. Wilhelm's commentary states, a sober awakening from false enthusiasm is quite possible and very favorable. Note that no blame is mentioned, suggesting that you are more ignorant than culpable in the situation at hand. A quote from Swedenborg in Arcana Coelestia, while he is in a state of bondage, that is while lusts and falsities rule. The man who is subjected by them supposes that he is in a state of freedom, but it is a gross falsity, For at the very time he is carried along by the delight of his lusts and of the pleasures derived from them, that is, by the delight of his loves. And because it is by a delight, it appears to him as free. Everyone thinks himself free while he is being led by some love, so long as he follows whithersoever it leads. James Acorn breaks changing line 6 into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, conquer your illusions and change your ways. And B, illusions are shattered when pursued to their logical conclusions. Bringing back around again what I was talking about an alchemy of just everyday life. When you're able to see to the full conclusion of something, illusions are shattered. So sometimes even doing an internal, putting yourself in a position of what happens when I actually get what I want. For instance, maybe we could avoid those issues of working so incredibly hard for this goal that when it arrives, we lose interest, for instance, or even worse, are turned off completely by the fact that we ever even wanted it, and completely demystified and lose that kind of ideal image of the thing. It's no longer ideal. It was being fueled by a passion for pursuit, possibly, or something like that, more than the actual end goal being something that you would want if you had it. Being that there's a lot of danger in the world right now, clearly it's not just an internal process it's talking about here. That, however, one of the commentaries brought out that it was so important to act correctly inwardly because the state of the world hung in the balance of it. That's like how intense it made it sound. It might have been Browne Walker in the Secret Hexagram. I'm just going to read it since it's coming up. Qian obstruction. This is the hidden influence behind the situation. The Secret Hexagram, obstruction, or Qian. Surrounded by obstructions, one must first retreat, then seek the direction of the sage. There's an old saying which fits this hexagram: you are caught between a rock and a hard place. In other words, you are surrounded by obstructions. As much as you may want to blame others for the difficulty, in all likelihood, the true obstruction is in your own thinking. What is called for now is a retreat into self-examination and self-correction. Emotions of desire, fear, or anger may tempt you to take action now, but do not be seduced. The presence of these strong feelings is proof that you are off balance and need to steady yourself. As long as you try to forcibly achieve external results rather than carefully following higher truth step by step, you will be obstructed from making personal progress. Whenever we indulge in judgments about others, we obstruct our own peace of mind and progress. We should choose instead to see the best in others, allow them to come and go as they will, and turn our energies inward towards self-improvement. Often the faults in our own thinking are revealed only with the aid of others. You would be wise now to seek the advice of a qualified counselor or truth-minded friend. Retreat, self-examination, and self-correction will remove the obstructions that block your path now. Reflecting off of each other beneficially when we're not hiding, and we offer a really great mirror. Maybe these synapses of this cosmic organism or just ecosystem of the Tao. This can bring about a depth of wisdom that could not be attained by someone by themselves. And with all the heightened danger And the emphasis, I think just naturally people are hopefully more steady about, not always though, sometimes we're completely oblivious until, like he said, maybe it was Hilary Barrett in The Secret Hexagram, but just doggedly trudging onward until the path peters out underneath us. In her translation of The Secret Hexagram, it talked about turning around and that being essential. Obviously, the ego is going to be the thing that demands its highest, its interests as being the highest of concern, which in the situation we're in, truthfully, is not that way. For the ego to always get its way is like a kid always getting sweets. It's not sustainable. A certain class of people or society always getting its way at the expense of all the others is not sustainable. That's, let's say you really love your hand, and so the rest of you, goes through all of this kind of like hampered situation just to have this amazing hand. Kind of a weird. Lady in the Water, the guy exercises one side of his body only and not the other. And it's just kind of this unbalanced situation that's really weird. He's making himself a science experiment of sorts. The part of the body is still a part of the body. If the rest of the body ends up dying, for instance, then the hand is not going to be able to live. It's not sustainable. It's not wholesome. It's not all-inclusive. It's not equal exchange. It's none of that. Going through a shift, unsettled, being not yet across, hexagram 64, our supporting hexagram, is indicating that there's a potential to cross in a beneficial way, that we're almost at the finish line. And then if we can kind of like do some very critical self reflection and be careful not to act rashly, we might just be able to, like it says, not trying to have any influence over affairs. We talked about that as well, that we're not trying to do any influence on external situations. Really turning inward is the goal. And there may be a call to action of some sort, but that's only going to be case-by-case basis. And also I would think about reflecting on what the sage or the enlightened being or your higher self, like what that is speaking to you, so to speak, in that kind of still small voice, if you want to use that kind of term, is saying. But to hear a still small voice, you almost have to be in meditation. And this changing line 2 almost shows someone in a cave meditating. That's almost what it is. It's almost like that, like you're completely removed. And in 6, it's like everything's gone wrong for so long, and the ego's got its way for so incredibly long, and we're almost at this rollover into a new cycle, or we already have, but we could just as well continue. Just going into another cycle doesn't guarantee that it's going to be different than the first one. You kind of have to honor that higher principle and the will of the self above the ego for anything to change. You could just get rocked, you know what I mean? And the world and the state of affairs in it right now are proof of that. It's not hard to find proof of people making stupid decisions based on ego concerns on a wide scale, and largely those in power being, the prominent proof of that, or representation of that, on a just out for all to see. And so when that's going on, it might be easy to feel like there's nothing wrong in acting the way the world acts and acting the way everybody's acting. Everyone's in it for themselves, ultimately. What's wrong with that? Well, look around. There's a whole lot wrong with it. And if we're at a new cycle and we're changing over to the new one, we're not yet across, but we're about to be. But there's this like danger in falling through the ice that's floating on this river that we're trying to cross. Attention definitely needs to go internally, and a balance needs to be established, and the will of the sage, as it were, or the Tao, or the higher self, needs to be the thing that shines through this. It just needs to happen. It can't be any other way at this stage, which puts the ball in all of our court, so to speak, to be the higher persons, or to take the right path, the higher path. Is that what it's called? I want to put it in terms of higher and lower, but Tao Te Ching will read chapter 5 in 3 different translations. Light turning off might be indicating to wrap it up here. If I can find them. Here we go. Let's start with where you at, Buddha? Give me a second. Let me see. There it is. The Eternal Tao Te Ching, Benjamin Hoff. Chapter 5. It's deleted. It's because he doesn't believe that Lao Tzu actually wrote that, but I've got a similar commentary that Benjamin Hoff esteems. This isn't it, is it? No, definitely is not. It's this one. Or is it? I think it's... Here you are. Now did you get this one? John C.H. Wu, translated by John C.H. Wu. There we go. Chapter 5 of the Tao Te Ching. Heaven and earth is not sentimental. It treats all things as straw dogs. The sage is not sentimental. He treats all his people as straw dogs. Between heaven and earth, there seems to be a bellows. It is empty, and yet it is inexhaustible. The more it works, the more comes out of it. No amount of words can fathom it. Better look for it within you. And then from the Tao Te Ching, translated by Jia Fu Feng and Jane English. 47 books over here. And I'm sorting through. Chapter 5. Heaven and earth are ruthless. They see the 10,000 things as dummies. The wise are ruthless. They see the people as dummies. The space between heaven and earth is like a bellows. The shape changes, but not the form. The more it moves, the more it yields. More words count less. Hold fast to the center. Silence and truth. The world takes no more prisoners. To the intellectuals, they become zero without consciousness. The sage is the world. Zero contains what is real of heaven. Too much has been said already. The heart knows this.